Mr. President, 50 years ago, more than 650 million men, women, and children from nearly every corner of the earth gathered around radios and televisions with wide eyes and quickly beating hearts. They gathered to witness one of the greatest triumphs of ingenuity and cooperation in human history. Scrawled across television screens were the words never seen before, live from the moon. I remember that moment vividly. I was 10 years old, and I was in France with my mother and my French family, my grandma and grandpa, and we huddled around a little black and white TV in my grandma's home on July 20th, 1969. It was evening in France when the landing occurred. Our eyes were glued to the screen, and we saw this grainy video and little prickly audio broadcast of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as they were attempting to do what no human had ever attempted to do before. And then almost 2 hours after the landing, as we held our breath and saw the landing, almost 2 hours after that, Commander Armstrong created the first human boot print not on planet Earth. In that moment, I remember thinking, the astronauts on the moon didn't just represent America at that moment. They also represented my family that lived in France and their excitement. They really represented everybody in the world. They were representing humanity and what is achievable when you dream big. I have come to the floor today to honor the incredible achievement of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, as well as the 400,000 people around the world who made the Apollo 11 landing possible. Among those were NASA's now famous hidden figures, African-American women pioneers, including Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and Dorothy Vaughan, who were responsible for calculating trajectories to get Apollo astronauts to and from the moon. Ultimately, this achievement was the result of perseverance of countless individuals and, of course, the American taxpayers who, after numerous high-profile failures, including the loss of the very first Apollo crew, they continued to support the Apollo program. Over the last 3 months, there have been celebrations of this anniversary around the world because the achievements of Apollo were achievements for humanity. Here in the Senate, I was proud to introduce legislation with Senator Ted Cruz that would establish the first of its kind federal protections for the Apollo landing site. Our bill, the One Step to Protect Human Heritage in Space Act, would permanently protect the Apollo landing sites from intentional and unintentional disruptions by future moon missions. It would ensure that any activities destined for the moon and licensed by the United States government would have to follow NASA's preservation guidelines for the Apollo sites. In recent years, a number of countries and private companies have announced plans to send spacecraft to the moon. For example, India just recently delayed a launch of a spacecraft that is destined for the moon, and China has announced plans to establish a permanent presence on the moon. Our legislation will set example for other countries to protect these sites for their historical, archaeological, scientific, and engineering value, and will help ensure that future lunar activities do not disturb these sites. I am pleased that last week we were able to pass the One Small Step Act out of Senate Commerce Committee, thanks to the leadership of our Chairman, Roger Wicker, and Ranking Member, Maria Cantwell, and their staffs. And today I ask the Senate to take one small step in passing this legislation, a first-of-its-kind conservation measure to honor and preserve human heritage in space. As if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 152, S. 1694.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 152, S. 1694, a bill to require any federal agency that issues licenses to conduct activities in outer space to include in the requirements for such licenses an agreement relating to the preservation and protection of the Apollo 11 landing site and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I further ask that the Peters Amendment to the committee-reported substitute be considered and agreed to, and the substitute as amended be agreed to.
Is there objection? Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill as amended.
If there's no further debate, the questions on passage of the bill as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill as amended is passed.
I further ask that the committee-reported amendment to the title be agreed to and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague, Senator Cruz, for helping me develop and advance this legislation. Thanks as well go to my colleagues on the House Science Committee, Chairwoman Johnson and Horn, and Ranking Members Lucas and Babin for their leadership and support in the House of Representatives. Mr. President, 50 years ago, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left a plaque on the lunar surface. On that plaque is a map of the Earth and the following words: "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." Mr. President, our grandchildren's grandchildren should have an opportunity to observe this plaque. And I thank my colleagues for taking this small step with me to ensure that the opportunity will remain for generations to come, and that spirit of Apollo, of ingenuity, of cooperation, and of peace will inspire generations to come. Thank you, Mr. President.